As Jim mentioned, our series is called Faith in Action. And the question I asked last week is, what are you believing for 2016? It's the most important question you can ask about this year. What are you believing for? Because nothing comes to us spiritually without faith. And so if you turn your Bibles with me, I'm going to start off reading Hebrews chapter 11. We're covering Hebrews 11 and 12 over the next 2 months. I only preached on verse 1 and 2, so we have a lot to cover. The chunks will get bigger as we go. But Hebrews chapter 11, starting at verse 3. Actually, I'll just start with verse 1. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. This is what the ancients were commended for. By faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. By faith Abel brought God a better offering than Cain did. By faith he was commended as righteous when God spoke well of his offerings, and by faith Abel still speaks even though he is dead. By faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God. And without faith, it is impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. By faith, Noah, when warned about things not yet seen, in holy fear, built an ark to save his family. By his faith, he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness that is in keeping with faith. If this bottle of water, what's remaining, was pond water, all you could see with your physical eyes is some dingy, maybe yellowish water. That's all you would see. But the truth be told, if this was pond water, there is an entire microcosm, an entire world that's alive in this remaining bottle of water. It'd be, hydras and amoebas and all kinds of stuff I've long forgotten since junior high. All kinds of stuff. But you need an amplification of your sight, something to translate your sight so that you can see what cannot be seen with just your physical eyes. You need, namely, a microscope to see into what is apparent and see what's really happening. You are sitting right now in a room with a speaker in front of you and various lights and chandeliers and people next to you, but do you know that right alongside that is an entire world that is more real than the reality you are in, that you can see with your physical eyes? That there is a realm of spirit where there's the Godhead, there's angels, there's demons, there are spirits sitting in chairs, but you can't see that with physical eyes. You need an amplification of sight. You need a translation of sight. And the Bible calls that faith. Faith is your spiritual microscope. Faith is what allows you to pierce the physical world and see into the spirit. And that's why it says in verse 1 and 2, it is by faith that you have confidence what you hope for, assurance of what you don't see. Because with physical eyes, hope and the invisible are insubstantial. But with spiritual eyes, you can have hope that's anchored in Christ. And you can have a faith in God that is so real, it's more real to you than the ground you're standing on. That's by faith. And the Bible contrasts these two sights, physical and spiritual, all the time. Jesus would often say, as he teaches in parables, these people see, but they don't see. They hear, but they don't hear. They see, but they don't see. Jesus is obviously talking about spiritual eyes. And then he says to his disciples who are listening, you see. You can actually see. And then Paul takes up the same theme in 2 Corinthians 5:7. We live by faith, not by sight. There are two different kinds of seeing. The one that you do with your physical eyes, the one you do with your spiritual eyes. And guess which one is more important? There is a world that is eternal. There's eternal stakes. There are realities that are more real than the stuff you can touch, smell, hear, physically see. And all that can only be accessed by faith. Imagine trying to operate in this physical world without sight. Can you get from your bedroom to the car blindfolded? Maybe some of you, it's such a routine. Maybe you might bump into a few things, but can you then drive a car to work? I mean, you'd be helpless without sight. There'd be things you're missing all the time because you cannot see. You'd be in danger. How are we then to operate in this spiritual realm that is real without faith? I think about what it says in 2 Kings about Elisha's servant Gehazi, right? They were surrounded, the two men were surrounded by the enemy. Gehazi comes out of his tent and notices like an entire army encamped around them, and he's freaking out. And Elisha says, Lord, open the eyes of my servant. What does that mean? I mean, he's actually seeing things. I mean, Elisha's not talking about physical sight. He says, open up the eyes of my servant. And then says, when the servant's eyes were opened, he saw chariots of fire all around, the angelic warriors protecting. The stakes are so high because if Gehazi and Elisha only could see physically, where would they be? Loading up their donkeys, finding some back route through the country to escape. But the reason they stand their ground and they're able to call down a miracle where the entire army's blinded is because they could see by faith. My prayer for the next 2 months is that God would open up our eyes to see. God, open up my eyes to see. Open up my eyes to see so I can navigate reality. Reality as it really is, not just the physical world, but the spirit realm as well. How do I navigate fully the world that God created that is both physical and spiritual? We need the eyes of faith to be opened. Next to me are 2 boards. This is our faith board. Behind it's actually a mountain scene that you can't see because it's covered by requests. Last week I talked about how if God has placed you in front of a mountain being an immovable, seemingly impossible trial or need, health need, financial need, relational need, and you need this thing to be shifted, God says by faith, as small as a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And so we're believing that every single thing up here, from husband, praise God, debt-free, financial freedom, all these things to be shifted over to here. Right? And so if God's already answered some of these prayers, I'm hoping after service you pluck your card and pin it to that side so we can all celebrate. But do you know how all these things will be shifted? By faith? Because all these things require spiritual eyesight. Decisions that have to be made not by physical sight. Investments that have to be made not just by the physical counting of your money. Places you need to sow, places you need to let go, places you need to move, directions you need, all coming by faith, not by sight. That's how these things will shift over. But what are we being asked to see specifically? What should we be seeing? Here's a clarification. Faith is ultimately not to see provision where there's no provision, or health where there is no health. That's the mistake we make, is like, okay, I'm in a need, so I'm going to believe that this need will be met, and that's faith. That's a part of faith. That's not the point of faith. Faith does not terminate at the level of need. Surely we believe in a God who does meet need, but the way faith is designed is you will not be happy until you see God and more of God. That's where faith is headed. All these things are just jumping, just platforms and diving boards to jump off of to see more of God. God is my healer. God is my providence. All these things are not the end in themselves, but faith wants to see God. You think of Job. Job had a lot of needs. Job was tested severely. He lost his children, lost his health, lost his home, lost everything. And you can imagine Job, by faith, believing for a lot of things. But here's what Job cries out. And here's a verse you'll see up on the screen. From Job 19. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been thus destroyed, yet in my flesh I shall see God, whom I shall see for myself, and my eyes shall behold, and not another. Job's cry is that through all this, God, I want to see you. And Tim Keller has this amazing line, Job never saw why he suffered, but he saw God, and that was enough. David was running for his life from an insane king who wants to kill him. He's lost his home. He can't go back. He could pray and believe for many things, but this is what David cries out in the cleft of a desert cave. One thing I ask from the Lord, this only do I seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord and to seek Him in His temple. In other words, David knew that faith, as much as it wanted protection and food and comfort, what he really wants to see is more of God. Because your faith is about what's eternal and what's spirit, and food is not eternal. Money is not eternal. Those things will come. Because the Word says, seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, everything will be given. Those things will come, make no mistake. But our hearts are not happy until they have seen God. More of God. And so my prayer for you, as we talk about faith, is not just to get the stuff. This is important because this helps us. But this is just the platform on which we look up and see more of God. What are you believing for in 2016? I pray all of you will say more of God. More of God. Yes, through these means, perhaps, but more of God. Faith is a means to see God. Faith is all about seeing God. And so if you look at the list of ancients throughout Hebrews 11, they all had a special eyesight. They could all see things the world could not see. That's their faith, a special kind of sight. And as we read in our passage, I want to highlight a few ways the ancients saw God by faith. Here's the first. Faith is to see God as creator when all the world just sees chaos. Faith is to see God as creator when all the world sees is chaos. It's really interesting here that the author, before he dives into Abel and Cain, or Cain and Abel, he first starts with the cosmos. He starts with, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. I love the way the author kind of zooms out and starts from like big picture. It says in Psalm 19, verse 1, the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands. Let me paraphrase what David's saying. The heavens say, someone made me. I didn't happen by accident. And yet, for the last 200 years, that's the question. You look up, is it creator or is it chaos? Know that before that time, throughout the millenniums, it was always which creator, because they all believed someone made this. No one just... But the last 200 years, it's really creator or chaos. And science says chaos. That this just happened by accident. There's no design, no plan, no divine mind organizing all this. This just happened. And yet you have the Word of God saying the heavens proclaims that God made it. Is that crazy talk? Let me just throw out a few reasons why I think this is true. Let's start with just the sheer mass of the universe. 1 million Earths can fit into a sun, our sun. And our sun's not even that big. And there's 400 billion suns, or stars, I should say, in the Milky Way galaxy. And there are currently about 500 billion galaxies that scientists know of, or astronomers know of, in the universe. So that's 400 billion times 500 billion, which is 2 times 10 to the 23rd. That's 23 zeros. I don't even know what that's called. Okay, but it's a lot of mass. A lot of mass. Where did that come from? And then think about the energy. One solar flare, just one little hiccup of the sun, is like 1 million hydrogen bombs going off at once. That's how much power that one flare emits. Think of what the totality of the sun's power is times 10, 2 times 10 to the 23rd. Where does all that energy come from? And scientists say that all that mass, and I'm not even counting planets and comets and asteroids, plus all that energy was at some critical point condensed into some incalculable, that's a tough word, crazy ball of energy and mass, and it exploded. It's called the Big Bang. And science can tell you how it exploded and how the universe unfolded, but it cannot tell you why all that stuff was there and who put that stuff there. Because, I don't know, maybe I'm dumb, but how can something come from nothing? How can something come from nothing? And then look at the intelligence of the universe. Einstein, just by his mind, could find E equals mc squared. I think that has to do with energy and mass and some kind of constant, the speed of light, right? Wow, that was hard for me. So, how is it that scientists and academics can produce elegant equations from chaos? It shouldn't work that way. They say that the math of the universe is so elegant because the universe is intelligent. That someone mathematical made the universe to conform to math. It's amazing. And then you look at the fact that we're alive and there's life on this planet. Do you know that there are at least 15 constants that govern the laws of physics and the law of matter? And if the universe unfolded in any other way by the millionth of a degree differently than the way it did, we would have no life on this planet. And so a lot of scientists look at the universe and say the life was handcrafted. It wasn't just by accident. In fact, if you look at all the odds that's required to get to life, you might as well have a bomb explode in a print factory and expect a Shakespearean play just to develop. Impossible. Impossible odds. And so having said all that, I know, if you don't believe in God, it's not to say that these things convince you, but there's good reason to believe that when you look up, it's not chaos, it's a creator. And that makes a huge difference in the way you see things. Huge. Because if the God of the universe, who put mass, all that mass, and all the energy, and hung all the, heavenly bodies in the sky, is my God, and He's for me, doesn't that change your perspective on life? I remember a time where I was really confused, deciding between, should I stay in, this is back when I was an intern, many years back in LA, or in Southern California, and I had this chance to go to Virginia. And I wasn't sure, 3,000 miles and Virginia and blah, blah, blah. And I just was so confused. And so thank God I went there to meet all you fine folk who came with me. But I was really confused and I didn't know what to do or where to look. I just drove out to the ocean, to the beach late at night and climbed up a lifeguard tower. I remember sitting there looking out and it gets real moody at night with the ocean. Real moody. Moonlight, it's like the vast expanse of water and it's just crashing waves and it's all dark. And I heard God say to me, son, if I can make that, and look up, if I can hang that in the sky, I got you. Don't worry, I got you. Satan tries to dim your vision so that God is not big. The author starts with the size of God. He ordered the universe. He spoke it into command. If He can do that, what can't He do for you? Sometimes we look down and just see chaos. And the author says, look up and see a creator. Because when your eyes are up and you see a creator, it changes what you look down on. So that's the first challenge, is to see God with faith so that you see a creator, not chaos. There is no chaos in your life if you believe in God. There is no, just happened, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how this will resolve. If God is your God, the one who made the stars and made the heavens, made the earth, is in charge of you, He will not waste a second of your existence. He is creator, not chaos. Second thing we see here, and now we get to the ancients, is that faith is to see God as treasure when the world views Him as trivial. To see God as treasure when the world views God as trivial. So you have Cain and Abel, two children of Adam and Eve. They've had many more, but that was the first two. And what's sad to me, I don't know if you picked this up, is that they're actually included in the list of faith. Because what's sad about it is that Adam and Eve, there was a point in their life where they needed no faith. They walked with God. They literally hung out with God like I do with Jason or Antoine. They chilled out with God. They could see Him tangibly. And then sin came, and they were removed from the garden, and now, within one generation, they needed faith because God was distant. Sad, right? And so here you have a moment where Cain and Abel are worshiping. Cain gives an offering that is not accepted by God, and Abel gives one that is accepted and favored. Why? Well, our author today says it's because of faith. Abel gave by faith, Cain did not. Now here's the backdrop. If you go back to Genesis chapter 4, here's what happened. Abel gave from his firstborn and the fat, not the child, firstborn flock. He tended sheep. Okay, big clarification. He gave the fat of his firstborn flock, the best of the best. Agriculturalists and farmers, their first fruit, the first livestock is really important. And he gave the fat portions of it, the good stuff. But there's nothing like that for Cain. It just says he gave some crop. And so here's what I see. By faith, Abel was able to see God as treasure, as someone worthy of worshiping and giving his best. But Cain, his sight trivialized God. He thought, why give my best? I mean, I worked hard for these crops. I mean, God can get something, but not my best. And here's what I've come across with faith, because it says this is by faith. If you connect the dots, faith equals treasuring God. Faith equals prioritizing God above everything. When you don't have faith, you trivialize God. When you have faith, you treasure God. Because you see Him. You see Him as He really is, and your heart treasures Him. It's so tragic that Cain couldn't see God. Just one generation out, he could not see the God who made the universe, breathed life into his daddy. One generation out, and that was enough distance for Cain to put his crops above God. The sad thing is that what you treasure really shapes who you are and defines you. If you treasure the wrong thing, it wrecks you. You ever see like Roadrunner and the Wile E. Coyote? Okay? They do get into all kinds of weird things. And I remember, and maybe I'm making this up, but I remember a scene where Wile E. Coyote runs off a cliff and he realizes, oh my gosh, I'm off a cliff. He kind of hangs in midair, and the Roadrunner gives him like an anvil or an anchor, and down he goes, right? That's what I picture here. You wrap your heart around anything that's not God, it sinks you, destroys you. It says in Genesis 4, when Cain his face is crestfallen because he gave the wrong kind of sacrifice and God is not happy. There's something broiling and cooking in him, and God says, sin is crouching at your door. Here's what happens when you treasure the wrong thing. It allows Satan to establish a beachhead by which he harasses you and attacks you day after day after day. That's what happens if you believe in Jesus and there's something that you do not submit to God, you treasure this above something else. That's the operation of Satan in your life to attack you, dismantle you, and make you lose your confidence in God. And so you can be successful in the eyes of the world, but if you put your heart there and you treasure that, you will be crippled spiritually and you cannot see Him and you'll be limping with God your whole life. But you treasure the right thing, and God's world opens up to you. He brings you in really close. Think of the sinful woman who washed Jesus' feet with her tears and poured perfume on His head. Think of how close she got to Him. I don't know if anyone else touched Jesus' feet but His mama. And here was a sinful woman that the Pharisees were scoffing at, who comes and gets to touch Jesus' feet and be so close to Him. Why does Jesus give her that kind of access? Because she treasured Him. She saw Him. She lavished on Him. She treasured Him. If you want to get up close and personal with Jesus, if you want to have God's presence so thick in your life, then you have to have the eyes to treasure, not to trivialize. Because His fellowship will not contend with idols. He will not walk closely with someone who will demean Him and say, well, you're not worth my time and not worth my treasure, he won't fight with that. He'll just take a step back. But you want God to be up close with you. When you treasure him, he draws near. And there's so much for us to treasure because Abel didn't have the cross. Abel didn't have the gospel, and yet he saw enough of God to give him his best. But we have the story of God pursuing us to the point of death on a cross, holding back nothing for our sake. There's so much for us to treasure. And if we can see with faith and we decide to love him and give him our best and put him above everything else, his world opens up to us and he invites us in because now he can walk closely with us. But that's a tough question. Are you willing to see? Some of us are blinded on purpose. Do you really want to see God as your treasure? Well, how's your tithing? Man, no amens there. It's a tough question. And why am I bringing that up? This has to do with offering. Abel's offering was accepted. Cain's offering was rejected. Why? Because his faith was able to treasure God. Well, do you treasure God? Before you say, of course I do. How's your giving to God? And I don't want your money. Make no mistake. You can give to a different church. You can choose not to give. It's not about that. I'm asking about where your heart is. Because your heart is where your treasure is. And if it's a struggle to open up your wallet to give 10% to a God who's given you 100%, that's a check here saying, do I really treasure God? Do you look forward to your times with him as much as you do to the show you've DVR'd? Right? I mean, how much the hours we carve out, the food we personally prepare to eat in front of the TV, and then the enjoyment you get, and just looking forward to it, and then talking about it, blogging about it, or the favorite movie you want to see, the excitement level there. We cherish our entertainment. Do you cherish your moments with God in prayer, in the Word, in service, in worship? Well, when you start doing that, when you can see God for who he is, and you begin to wrap your heart around him and treasure him, his world opens up to you. And you begin to see things and hear things and experience things you never have before. Some of us, you're an idol away from revival. You are a bad habit away from breakthrough. You are an addiction away from God grabbing hold of you and doing amazing things with your life. And you scoff at Cain because he wasn't able to give grain. But you know what? We can't give a lot of things because we don't see him. And the cry of our heart should be, God, this year, let me see you in a way that your beauty and your majesty and your holiness captivates me, that I'm willing to give my life, all that I am, to you. And if you do that, my God, not only will these things be answered, but your whole life will be opened up to a world of spirit that you never expected or imagined. So we see God as creator, we see God as treasure, and you know what? I'm going to have to just blitz through Enoch and Noah because we're short on time. So if I were to preach those things, I'd say Enoch's faith enabled him to see God as friend when everyone else forgot him. Noah saw God as judge when everyone else saw God as a joke. And I'll eventually preach Noah. He's this guy I can't just skip over. But I will, because I'm out of time. But these men saw God. They saw God in a way that they were willing to give up so much. Enoch walked with God when no one else did in his generations prior. Before Noah built an ark in the desert before there was ever rain on the earth, all because they saw God. They saw him. They were captivated by him. They would give up anything and everything to pursue him. And I'm telling you, if you do not see enough to treasure, you have not seen. If you have not seen enough to give your life and fully your life, you have not seen enough. There should be a longing in us. God, I want to see more of you. Let me close with this line from Hebrews 4. It says, Hebrews 11, verse 6. And without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Why is it impossible to please God without faith? Well, how do you please God? Is it by doing more things, giving more money, whatever? No. in the end, it's love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Greatest commandment. What pleases God is love. But you cannot love what is not real, which is why we don't have a raging love affair with any kids here, with Santa Claus. All right? You appreciate him, you don't love him. You will not give your life to something that's not real, which is why faith determines your capacity to love God and be loved by him. Your faith are the riverbanks of the river love. Your faith is the bandwidth in which you're able to download God. Your faith determines the amount that you're able to fulfill that great commandment, because you can only love what you see. You can only love what you know, and that is what's real. Your spouse is real. That's why you love him or her so much. Is God real to you? Is he real enough to love him with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength? May your prayer in 2016 be, God, I want to see you as my creator, as my treasure. Let me see you, God. Let me see you, God. Because the more I see you, the more I know I'll be fully alive. I'll be able to live out these promises. I'll be able to live and fulfill the calling I'm supposed to have. Would you stand with me?